So you might find that when your paintings are dry, the paper has bent up a bit, but you could always weight that down with some random objects you have around, or if you have some masking tape or other tape, tape it down on all four sides. In fact, it's a good idea to do that while you're painting or before you paint, but I didn't want to make things extra complicated. I'm just using my water bottle and my paint box to hold my paints a bit steadier. So we're going to now explore what we can do once the paintings have dried. So this is like our first layer. I've done a couple more here that I didn't film, but it's the same principle. I put in blue, red and yellow and I just striped them together. Here I did blue and yellow and then I put a little purple at the top. So yeah, now they're dry, what could we do next? So first of all, I invite you to turn your painting around, unless you've taped it down to the table. And just see, does it look different or interesting upside down? Can you see any different landscapes? Does it suggest anything to you? Maybe mountains, cliffs, clouds, a headland. And now you're going to explore, could you paint some details over the top of your dry backgrounds? So you've had these lovely, lush, wet in wet backgrounds. You've used paint very sort of fluidly and wetly and let it all merge around. Now we're going to paint in a slightly crisper way to add just a few little crisp details over the top. Don't get too carried away. You don't need to do too much here. Less is more. And be playful. You know, maybe you see a sea, so you could add a boat or a dolphin or a whale, or Turner often had these kind of what would you call them? I don't know, bits of broken twig or stump or fence or something in the foreground, or like, I don't know, the rotting hulk of a boat. I'm not sure what that thing I've just painted there is. Maybe it's some kind of tumble down pier. And perhaps now I'm going to try and paint a boat, although I've not really thought this through, I must admit. You'll notice as well I just painted some clouds. And yeah, I just kind of dabbed it on there and I let my brush be a little wetter for that because, you know, clouds are quite kind of floaty looking, aren't they? You do want a small brush for this, but you don't actually need a tiny, tiny brush. The problem with a tiny, tiny brush is it doesn't hold a lot of paint. So this brush, it's not that small. I used it on its side to do the fourth box, if you remember the previous demo. But I'm using it now on its tip, and that means I can get quite a nice fine line. If you're really struggling with this, you could also use coloured pencils, pens, felt tips, anything with a fine line or a fine end to it to add your detail. This second box here, it looks a bit like a city to me. I've got a sense of like a city with a bit of smog rising up above it, so I'm just painting some little boxes and lines to suggest buildings. So yeah, just look at your little boxes and just with quite a open mind, do they suggest anything to you? Does one remind you of something? A sunset, a place you went on holiday, a field of buttercups, a sea? What comes to mind as you look at them? And remember, you could turn your page upside down if nothing's coming. I thought I'd try and draw a little person here. What I'm doing is I'm painting the figure by starting with the body, which I just do as a kind of line, and then I can pull arms and legs out from that line or that block and add a little dot at the top for the head. That's the trick. Don't start with the head because you'll end up with a really massive head. That's what happens. Maybe I'll add a dog here as well. Just imagine I'm painting alongside you, just to give you a few ideas. But yeah, just explore, see what happens. Just adding layers of paint over the top of what you've already done. The only other thing to emphasise is that you're using the paint kind of crisply straight onto the paper now. You're not you're not using loads of water and making it all wet and sloshy and letting one thing blend into another so much. You can do a little bit of that, but think finer brush, working with the tip of a brush and painting in a more sort of precise and delicate way, just adding a few details, a tree, a mountain, a person, a hill in the distance. Remember, things in the distance, they appear paler and usually a bit bluer and sometimes a bit hazier. So if you're painting things further away, bear that in mind. You could let your brush be a bit sort of softer, or let your colours be a bit softer, a bit paler. Maybe paint a little bit wetter as well, actually, as that will give you a slightly blurrier effect. Things in the foreground, however, make them nice and crisp. It's a good idea to use similar colours to colours that you've used on your background. So you can try a new colour. I didn't use this burnt sienna colour on my background, but I feel like it goes quite well. Because this is a more delicate painting, I'm not going to go in quite as strong, although I could. It'd be interesting to see what would happen if I did. But yeah, notice the 3 boxes I did already, they're all mainly reds, yellows and blues, and I've used a dark blue or a dark blue with a bit of red in it for my foreground, for my details. So it all kind of connects and looks like it all belongs together. And you could always test your colours on the edge of your paper like I just did there to see what it's going to be like. See, I'm not sure about this darker purpley blue, whether it's going to work or not, but we'll see. And you can see that I allowed the brush to be a bit more sort of wet and drippy when I did that bit of foreground there. And that's why it looks a bit more blurry. Now I'm trying to be a bit crisper as I do this boat with a rather misshapen and ragged sail. Perhaps it's a mermaid with her hair flowing out behind. I'm not sure. Yeah, I should probably just leave that boat be. So this one reminded me a bit of a field of flowers. There's lots of lovely meadows full of buttercups at the moment. A little bit harder to make a bright pale colour like yellow or orange stand out because watercolour is transparent. So at this point it might be a nice idea to use a bit of coloured pencil or a bit of fine line pen to help to really pick out those details. But that's up to you. You can also buy this watercolour called gouache, which is opaque, and you can use pale colours like yellow or even white in gouache to add bright details over the top of a watercolour painting. Turner did that himself sometimes. He used white gouache or white opaque paint and other colours to paint features back into the landscape. So I hope you've found this instructive, and thank you for joining me. If you want to know more, you can look me up at emmaburley.com. That's where you'll find information about how to follow me and information about my watercolour book for mindfulness and creativity called Soul Colour and how you can get hold of that, which has lots more ideas and exercises you might like to try.